I call the member for Macarthur.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I rise today to speak on the Appropriations Bill 2012-13 to represent the people of Macarthur in what can only be described as a bad budget. The people of Macarthur are honest, hard-working people who want nothing but the best for their children and future generations of our community. They have high hopes for a strong economy for their country that will provide more jobs and greater opportunities for all Australians. And while they are working hard to pay off their mortgages and balance the family budget, they are becoming fed up with a government that continues with its wasteful spending and incompetence. Because while the people of Macarthur are trying to decrease their debt and cut down their credit limits, this government has increased the nation's credit card by $50 billion to $300 billion. It's only been 5 short years since Labor came to office in 2007, inheriting a debt ceiling of zero. It's no wonder the people of Macarthur are fed up with a government which is continuing to borrow more than $100 million a day. In 18 months, its estimated deficit for 2011-2012 has blown out from $12 billion to $44 billion, and the year's not even over yet. This is the fourth Labor deficit in 4 years, which together total $174 billion. Interest payments on Labor's debt alone is set to reach an alarming $8 billion per year. That's $22 million a day on interest payments alone. And who do they think is going to pay off this debt? The debt will be left for our children, the future generations of Australia, to pay off. It's just not good enough. The people of Macarthur can see through the spin surrounding this budget, a budget which includes the world's biggest carbon tax, cynical bribes to soften the impact of a tax, broken promises on the corporate tax cuts, higher unemployment, the blow-ups in the cost of border protection, an underfunded NDIS, and equity funding for the NBN, which has been kept off budget. In headline cash terms, the Gillard government will spend $8.7 billion more than it earns in 2012-13. Because the government continues to spend on projects such as the NBN, which have been taken off budget, if this government was honest and included the NBN expenditure, the budget would show deficits over the next 3 years. To put it simply, there would be no surplus if the NBN was on the books. In fact, by bringing forward just 2 programs, the back-to-school payment and Commonwealth grants to local government, the government artificially saves more than $1.5 billion in 2012-13. Honest budget treatment of these 2 programs alone would wipe out the Treasurer's wafer-thin surplus. When will this government learn that cooking the books is no substitute to good, solid economic management? Let's face it, the Treasurer lives in Wayne's world. His $1.5 billion forecast surplus is a mirage. The harder you look at it, you realise it just doesn't exist. And even if the Treasurer does deliver on his razor-thin surplus, Australia will need more than 93 years of the Treasurer's surpluses to repay all the waste and mismanagement created by this Treasurer. And it's the families of my electorate who are feeling the pinch from this government's waste and mismanagement. The rising cost of living is a major factor affecting families, pensioners, self-funded retirees, small businesses and homeowners in Macarthur. Many have contacted my office concerned about the impacts of the carbon tax on their electricity and grocery bills. And things will only get worse with the world's biggest carbon tax set to hit families, jobs and investment very, very soon. The budget papers confirm that despite falling international prices, the carbon tax will go up to $29 a tonne in just 3 years, and an additional $36 million will be spent on taxpayer-funded carbon tax advertising over the next 2 years. This tax will affect the entire economy, and the price of everything will go up and up. Families will be hit hard, and small businesses, which is the engine room of our economy, will receive no compensation for the carbon tax. Madam Deputy Speaker, the people of Macarthur are against this tax. They are unsure and anxious about its effect on their weekly bills, and they are angry after being misled by the Prime Minister, who said there would be no carbon tax under a government she leads days before the last election. The Treasurer didn't mention the carbon tax once in his budget speech, or indeed the budget papers. He makes a glib passing reference to a carbon price, but tells people not to worry about it. It's no big deal. The tax will be the single greatest impost on the family budget of every household in Macarthur. Even the Prime Minister's initial compensation package didn't make a ripple in the angst felt by the community. Families in Macarthur are already paying some of the highest electricity prices in the world. Now that we're heading into winter, this government will be forcing older residents on fixed incomes to spend their evenings in the dark and cold because they won't be able to afford to use their heaters or turn on the lights. What would the Treasurer say to 60-year-old Mrs Shute, who contacted my office last week? Mrs Shute survives week to week by eating once a day, cooking once a week, and showering every second day to keep her electricity and water bills down. Come the 1st of July, Mrs Shute will get a hit with the carbon tax, stretching what little finances she has even further. I'd like to know, when did electricity become a luxury in this country, and when did having hot water suddenly become aspirational? People on fixed incomes, such as pensioners like Mrs Shute and self-funded retirees, single mothers and people with a disability will be the hardest hit of all by the carbon tax. The base carbon price will continue to rise, but their compensation will not. And now, the Prime Minister and the Treasurer resorted to desperately buying back votes from mums and dads with their school kids' bonus sugar hit, a vain attempt to hide the true effects of the carbon tax. And the Treasurer has pushed this payment into the 2011-12 financial year to protect his wafer-thin surplus. This is treating Australian families with contempt, throwing cash with one hand and taking away even more with the other. Not to mention all seniors, students, couples and pensioners will miss out on this new cash splash. And the families aren't the only ones who will do it tough again as a result of this budget. This budget offers nothing for more than 800 small businesses in Macarthur, but also be hit with the world's biggest carbon tax. The government has offered nothing new in this budget to provide immediate relief to struggling businesses, with the sector seeing a 48% increase in insolvencies. I have met with many small business owners in Macarthur recently who are fed up with all the broken promises, because every one of these broken promises will affect their livelihoods. First, the broken promise not to introduce a carbon tax, now the broken promise to cut the company tax rate. Carbon tax-related sweeteners in the form of accelerated depreciation allowances aren't fooling anyone. These allowances are going to rely on small businesses having the ready cash to spend on new capital items. The government's abolition of the entrepreneur's tax offset has increased tax for nearly 370,000 of our smallest businesses, including micro, home-based, independent contractor and start-up businesses with incomes of less than $755,000 a year. The local corner shop in Macarthur is not only going to have to deal with an increase in costs for supplies and electricity, it's also going to have pressure from consumers looking for a bargain. As the cost of living and prices increase and unemployment rises, as forecasted in the budget. Last year's budget promised 500,000 new jobs over 2 years, but the government now expects to miss its target by 300,000 jobs. Meanwhile, the unemployment rate is forecast to increase to 5.5%, while the government is cutting $200 million out of job services programs. Even the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry said the decision to abandon company tax is dripping with politics and a low blow to the business sector. The Chamber also said that this budget lacks vision for the broader economy. Madam Deputy Speaker, I hold grave concern for the future of small business in Macarthur. These local mums and dads will be hit with the hardest because their costs will go up and the carbon price goes up, and they won't receive a single cent in compensation. The Coalition has a clear roadmap to restore hope, reward and opportunity for small business by scrapping the carbon tax and getting out of the way of business by slashing $1 billion worth of red tape. We believe in a hand up, not a hand out, and in rewarding those who work hard to earn a living and support their families. And while the much-needed infrastructure projects in Macarthur don't rate a mention in this budget, the Treasurer does manage to promise preliminary economic, social and environmental studies into the sustainability of Wilton as a site for a second Sydney airport. The prospect of a second Sydney airport has been brewing in the background of Australian politics for well over 30 years, and the people of Badgerys Creek and Wilton have fought against it time and time again, and for good reason, Madam Deputy Speaker. The member for Frosby has been quoted in the Illawarra Mercury, so that while there are environmental challenges, and that's a huge understatement, with the Wilton site, you can also see enormous economic benefits for the region. Sounds like code, I support an airport at Wilton to me. I dare say that any economic benefits would be entirely negated by the massive cost for both the federal and New South Wales government if Sydney's water supply was contaminated. The 1985 Kinhill Stearns report clearly ruled out Wilton as a possible site for an airport because of the highly sensitive nature of the water catchment area. The development of an airport at Wilton will pose an extremely serious threat to the long-term quality and integrity of Sydney's drinking water supply. As the New South Wales State Member for Wallandilly, Jai Rao, said, what is spilled on the ground in Wilton ends up in our water supplies. The March 2012 Joint Study on Aviation Capacity for Sydney region identified that the Wilton site appears to have a partial overlap with a designated mine subsidence district, and all these sites are underlain by coal measures, which are actively being mined. So the questions need to be asked. Why would the Infrastructure Minister decide to place an airport on land affected by mine subsidence, and where will Sydney get its drinking water if Warragamba Dam, the Pean Dam, the Avon Dam and the Cordo Dam are compromised? The people of Macarthur have also been short-changed when it comes to the promised National Disability Insurance Scheme. While I understand that progress has been made with the NDIS, the government has only allocated $1 billion over 4 years, when the Productivity Commission has said that in that time frame, $3.9 billion is needed. That's $2.9 billion less than what's needed for the start-up years of the NDIS. I find it concerning and disappointing, and I think a lot of people living with a disability in Macarthur and their families will be feeling short-changed. The Productivity Commission also proposed that the NDIS would cover over 400,000 Australians. The government's budget announced would only extend to 20,000 Australians. Based on the budget figures, full implementation of a scheme by the Productivity Commission target of 2018 will not happen. This budget has let down the residents of Macarthur who are living with a disability and their families and carers. The government will be spending more each financial year, $8 billion on debt interest costs that will spend in total over the next 4 years on the NDIS. And the government has already rejected the Coalition's offer to develop a joint parliamentary committee chaired by both the Coalition and Labor Party spokespeople on disabilities. This would ensure the NDIS is kept above politics so it can survive through the 3 election cycles to be fully implemented. Madam Deputy Speaker, I would also like to talk about the seniors in my electorate who have forgotten in this budget. In this budget, self-funded retirees will not receive a single cent of compensation to assist with the imposed damage of the carbon tax. In fact, this budget makes life much more difficult for self-funded retirees by reducing the higher tax concession for super contributions of high-income earners. It also defers a higher concessional contributions cap for over 50s with less than $500,000 in superannuation. This government has also made it difficult for self-funded retirees to meet their medical costs by introducing means testing of the medical expenses tax offset. The incentive for mature age workers to remain in the workforce has also been removed by phasing out the $500 mature age worker tax offset. And of the $66.9 million allocated to the new Economic Potential for Seniors Australians program, only $10 million is set aside to assist mature age workers gain employment in the workforce. This program pays $1,000 to an employer who takes on a mature age worker for 3 months, compared to the Coalition policy that would pay $3,250 to an employer who takes a mature age worker from the welfare system and employs them for a minimum of 6 months. The remaining $56.9 million has been allocated to talking about the problem of discrimination, not fixing it with things like an advisory panel to discuss legislation for positive ageing. This is just another example of this government's waste and mismanagement, but the waste is nothing new to this government. A local newspaper in my electorate has labelled the National Broadband Network as a flop for the people of Macarthur. The NBN, which the Treasurer has left off the books this year, has become the laughingstock of the developed world. People will be paying 3 times as much for their internet to use speeds that a majority of the population aren't going to need, and no thought has been given to prioritising areas that either don't have broadband or have inadequate services. On top of this, the government will spend $20 million on propaganda campaign about the NBN to paint over the waste and mismanagement of the $50 billion project. That's if it does cost $50 billion to complete. Some are estimating it could cost between $60 and $80 billion. To make matters worse, this week the Australian newspaper reported that foreign-controlled companies have been awarded 82 cents in every dollar's worth of contracts struck for Labor's national broadband network, sparking warnings that local industry is being bypassed in Australia's biggest infrastructure project. Shame. The Coalition will continue to hold the government to account on the NBN. We'll also continue to develop our alternative broadband policy, which will improve the quality and availability of broadband for all Australians. The Coalition also has great plans for Australian school students and will revive foreign languages in schools to help unlock the potential offered by the Asian century. Within a decade, we want to see 40% of all Years 12 students in Macarthur and across Australia studying a foreign language. The proportion of Year 12 students studying a foreign language has dropped from about 40% in the 1960s to around 12% today. Knowing the language of our major trading partners, China, Japan, Korea, India, is essential to unlocking the potential of the Asian century for Australia. We believe that starting in preschool, every student should have an exposure to foreign languages. This is part of the Coalition's positive plan for our economy. I'm looking forward to working with students in Macarthur and schools to ensure this plan to revitalise foreign languages in schools becomes a reality. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm proud to be part of a coalition that has an alternative to this Labor incompetency. We will restore hope, reward and opportunity for all Australians. We will restore good economic management and we will end the waste. We will repeal the carbon tax and stop Labor's attack on the family budget. Only with a growing economy it is possible to have lower taxes, better services and a stronger budget bottom line, as Australians discovered during the Howard era. Under a coalition government, there will be tax cuts without a carbon tax, but we'll find the savings to pay for them. From an economic perspective, the worst aspect of this budget, there is no plan for economic growth, nothing whatsoever to promote investment or employment. The coalition will ensure Australia has a vigorous 5-pillar economy, strong manufacturing, vibrant agriculture, growing knowledge-based industries and resilient service sectors as well as a mining industry. We will restore Australia to its rightful place in the world. Madam Deputy Speaker, I join my colleagues here today who are disappointed in this government and its budget. I'd like to see the people of Macarthur frustrated because I know there's a better way. I've seen it before, a strong economy which supports all Australians. But to achieve this, we need an election so the coalition government can put policy in place that will see our country and its peoples prosper. The coalition will reward innovation, not punish those Australians who contribute so greatly to our nation. We will restore opportunity for all Australians, young and old, and restore hope in our nation's future. The people of Macarthur have a bright future ahead of them under the coalition government.
Time
That's something
has
I'm very sure of.
expired.